Hey guys, today we're diving into something absolutely terrifying. I'm going to show you how one day in medieval summer would prove you're living better than the richest kings in history. If this makes you grateful for air conditioning, hit that like. And tell me where you're watching from because your morning routine beats anything medieval royalty ever experienced. The summer sun rises mercilessly over the English countryside. You are Willem, 24 years old, a tenant farmer whose calloused hands have known only work since childhood. Your twisted ankle from last winter's accident throbs with each step, a constant reminder that you're one injury away from watching your pregnant wife Marie and 3-year-old son Thomas starve. The barley harvest will determine whether your family survives the coming winter, and today feels like it might break you entirely. But here's what you need to understand. Medieval people weren't superhuman. They simply had no choice but to endure suffering that would overwhelm any modern person within hours. What you're about to experience isn't just history. It's the forge that shaped human resilience for 1,000 years. You wake as the church bell clangs across the village, calling the faithful to morning prayer. But there's no peaceful awakening here. Your straw mattress writhes with life, fleas, lice, and bedbugs that have made your family their permanent home. The heat is already unbearable, and it's barely past dawn. Your one-room hut, shared with Marie, Thomas, 2 goats, and a chicken, radiates the stored heat from yesterday's inferno. The smell hits you like a physical blow, a symphony of stale beer, human sweat, goat dung, and something that might be mold but probably isn't. There's no escape from it because there are no windows, just wooden shutters that trap the air. You try to stretch, but your joints ache like those of a man twice your age. At 24, you're already considered middle-aged in a world where most people die before seeing 40. Marie stirs beside you, her belly round with your second child. Even in sleep, she scratches unconsciously at the flea bites that cover her arms. Thomas whimpers in his corner, his small body covered in the same angry red welts that mark your entire family. Everyone has them, nobles, priests, children, because in medieval Europe, parasites don't discriminate. You face your first impossible choice of the day. You could use the family chamber pot, but that means emptying it later into the already overflowing village cesspit. You could risk the communal latrine, but 3 huts have been sealed shut this week due to summer sickness, and everyone knows the disease spreads fastest near the waste pits. Or you could hold it until you reach the fields, but that's hours of painful work ahead. Most people chose the latrine, which is exactly why disease spreads so fast through medieval communities. You make the same choice because when survival is measured in days, not years, long-term thinking becomes a luxury you can't afford. The walk to the communal latrine is a journey through hell itself. The wooden structure, built over a deep pit, reeks of human waste that's been fermenting in the summer heat for months. Flies swarm in black clouds, and the wooden seat is slick with things you don't want to identify. 3 people have died this week alone from the summer flux, what we now know as dysentery, and their families' huts remain sealed to prevent the spread. But you have no choice. Privacy is a luxury that doesn't exist in medieval peasant life, and bodily functions wait for no one. You do your business quickly, holding your breath, trying not to touch anything. The stench clings to your clothes, your hair, your skin. There's no soap to wash with afterward, just a bucket of questionable water that might be more dangerous than the filth you're trying to remove. As you return to your hut, you pass the sealed houses. Crude crosses are painted on their doors, and the smell of death mingles with the morning air. Yesterday, these were homes filled with laughter and argument. Today, they're tombs waiting for the church to decide when it's safe to bury the bodies. What passes for breakfast sits waiting on the wooden table, a hunk of barley bread so hard it could deflect arrows, and a bowl of weak ale that tastes like it's been filtered through old boots. The bread is your family's lifeline, but it's also crawling with weevils, small black insects that have made themselves at home in your grain stores. You don't pick them out. Protein is protein, and you need every calorie you can get. But here's what will surprise you. Even in this hell, Marie has saved you the biggest piece of bread. In a world where every calorie matters, where sharing food means choosing love over survival, she gives you strength for the day ahead. She doesn't speak. Words are unnecessary when the choice is so profound. The ale is safer than water, but barely. It's weak enough that children drink it, but strong enough that the brewing process has killed some of the bacteria that would otherwise destroy your family. You drink it warm because ice won't be invented for another few centuries, and even then only the wealthy will have access to it. The bread fights back as you chew it. Made from coarse barley flour, often bulked up with ground acorns or even sawdust, when times are lean, it scrapes against your teeth and gums. Your teeth, already loosened by poor nutrition and a lifetime of grinding through gritty food, ache with each bite. There's no sugar in your diet except for the occasional honey, but the constant wear from rough food means most adults your age are already missing several teeth. Thomas sits quietly beside you, mechanically chewing his smaller portion. At 3 years old, he's already learned not to complain about the weevils or the taste. Children who are picky about food don't survive medieval summers. He drinks his ale without grimacing, though you can see his small face wrinkle at the bitter taste. Through the cracks in your walls, you can see smoke rising from the sealed huts. The village whispers about the summer sickness, but you're beginning to notice a pattern. All 3 sealed houses are located near the communal latrine, where families draw their water from the same well that's contaminated by seepage from the waste pit. It's not coincidence, it's cause and effect that no one in your time understands. As you finish your meagre breakfast, you hear the first call for field work. The bailiff's horn echoes across the village, summoning every able-bodied person to the Lord's fields. Your twisted ankle throbs in anticipation, but there's no choice. The barley must be harvested, or everyone dies when winter comes. You kiss Marie's forehead, tasting the salt of her sweat, and head for the door. The sun has been up for barely an hour, but the heat already shimmers off the dirt paths. Your woolen tunic, the only clothing you own, clings to your body like a punishment. There's no cotton in medieval Europe, no linen for peasants, just scratchy, heavy wool that traps heat and moisture against your skin. And this isn't rare, this is Tuesday. Across medieval Europe, millions of families are facing identical choices with identical courage. While you're choking down weevil bread and contaminated ale, just 50 miles away in London, nobles wait to servants bringing cool wine and white bread. But even they face dangers you can't imagine, different but no less deadly. The walk to the fields begins, and with it, the real test of whether you can survive a single day in medieval summer. Your ankle protests with each step. Marie watches from the doorway, with worry etched on her face, and Thomas waves goodbye with the innocent trust that you'll return home alive. What you don't know yet is that before this day ends, you'll face choices that will test not just your body, but your very will to continue living. The walk to the Lord's fields takes you through the village centre, where the full scope of medieval summer horror reveals itself. The dirt paths, baked hard as stone by weeks of relentless heat, radiate warmth through your thin leather soles. But it's not just the ground that burns. The very air seems to shimmer with malevolence, thick and oppressive, carrying the stench of human waste, rotting food, and death from every direction. Other villagers shuffle past you, their faces already flushed and sweating, though the sun has barely climbed above the tree line. Old Henrik, the cooper, stumbles slightly as he walks, his breathing laboured and shallow. You've seen that look before, heat exhaustion creeping in before the real work even begins. By noon, someone will collapse. By evening, someone might not get back up. The fields stretch before you like a punishment ordained by God himself. Acres of barley, heavy with grain and desperate for harvest, shimmer in waves of heat that make your eyes water. There's no shade anywhere, no trees, no shelter, nothing but endless rows of grain under a sky that promises no mercy. The bailiff, Gerard the field supervisor, stands at the edge with his wooden staff, already marking down who arrives late. Late arrivals get smaller food rations, and smaller rations mean your family goes hungry. Your woolen tunic is already soaked with sweat, clinging to your back like a second skin made of discomfort. There's no changing clothes, no lighter fabric, no relief from the suffocating weight of the only garment you own. Medieval peasants don't have seasonal wardrobes. You wear the same rough wool through blazing summers and bitter winters because it's all you have. As you bend to begin cutting barley with your rusty sickle, the first wave of insects descends upon you like a biblical plague. Medieval summer means war, and you're losing badly to an enemy you can't defeat. Insects. Horseflies, each one the size of your thumbnail, circle your head in lazy, menacing loops before diving in to tear chunks of flesh from your neck and arms. Their bites don't just sting, they burn with a fire that spreads under your skin, and each wound swells into an angry red welt that will itch for days. But the horseflies are just the beginning. Mosquitoes rise from every patch of standing water, and in medieval England, that's everywhere. The village's primitive drainage means puddles and stagnant pools collect around every hut, every well, every low spot in the fields. They breed in the cesspit overflow, in the animal drinking troughs, in the dirty water that collects in broken pottery. The mosquitoes don't just bite. They swarm in clouds so thick you breathe them in, taste their bitter bodies on your tongue, feel them crawling into your ears and nose. Then come the ticks, dropping from the grain stalks onto your head and shoulders, burrowing into your scalp where you can't reach them. Medieval people don't understand that ticks carry disease. They just know that sometimes after harvest season, people develop strange fevers and die writhing in agony. The connection between the tiny parasites and the mysterious illnesses won't be understood for another 600 years. You swing your sickle through the barley, each stroke sending new insects into flight, and wonder how long a human body can endure this assault. Your arms are already streaked with blood from the horsefly bites, mixed with sweat that stings every open wound. Marie sent you with a rag to wipe your face, but it's already soaked and useless, and using it just spreads the dirt and insect remains across your skin. But here's what will surprise you. When you stumble and nearly fall from the combined assault of heat and insects, it's Thomas the carpenter who appears beside you with a makeshift hat woven from barley stalks. He doesn't speak, breath is too precious to waste on words, but he simply nods and continues working. Even in medieval hell, neighbors help neighbors survive. By mid-morning, the sun has climbed high enough to turn the fields into an open-air oven. The heat radiates up from the ground, down from the sky, and seems to emanate from the very air around you. Your body is screaming for water, but here's where medieval summer becomes truly impossible. There are no good choices, only degrees of danger. You could pay a full day's wages to Gerard for access to the Lord's private well, which is clean and cool and kept in the stone basement of the manor house. But a day's wages means your family doesn't eat tomorrow, and Marie needs food for the baby she's carrying. You could drink from the village stream, the same water source that everyone uses for washing clothes, watering animals, and, unfortunately, dumping waste when the cesspits overflow. 3 people have died this week from drinking that water, their bodies racked with fever and bloody flux until death came as a mercy. Or you could try to hold out until evening, working 12 hours in blazing heat with nothing but the weak ale you had at breakfast. But you've seen strong men collapse and die from heat exhaustion, their bodies simply giving up when pushed beyond human limits. Most peasants chose the stream, which is exactly why the summer sickness spread so fast through medieval communities. You make the same choice because when you're dying of thirst, the possibility of disease tomorrow seems less immediate than the certainty of collapse today. The stream water tastes like mud and metal, with an undertone of decay that makes your stomach lurch. But it's wet, and wet is life, even if it might be death in disguise. You drink deeply, trying not to think about what might be upstream, what animals might have died in it, what waste might have seeped into it from the overflowing village cesspit. As you return to work, you notice Gerard the bailiff watching you carefully, making notes on his wooden tablet. He's counting how often each worker stops for water, marking down who looks strong and who looks weak. The weak ones get the hardest jobs tomorrow, if they live to see tomorrow. The sun reaches its merciless peak just as Henrik the Cooper begins to stumble. You've been watching him all morning, seeing the signs that every medieval peasant learns to recognize: the glassy eyes, the shallow breathing, the way he keeps touching his head as if trying to hold his thoughts together. Heat exhaustion doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It creeps in quietly, stealing strength and reason until there's nothing left. Henrik falls forward into the barley, his sickle clattering away across the hard ground. His body convulses once, twice, then goes terribly still. The other workers barely pause. Death is common enough that stopping for it would mean falling behind in the quota, and falling behind means punishment for everyone. But here's where the true horror of medieval summer reveals itself. There's no medical help coming. No one understands heat stroke. No one knows about rehydration. And the nearest thing to a doctor is Father Benedict, who will prescribe prayer and bloodletting, treatments that would kill Henrik faster than the heat already has. You and 3 other men carry Henrik's body to the edge of the field, laying him in whatever shade you can find under the sparse hedgerow. His skin is burning hot to the touch, his breathing so shallow you can barely see his chest move. Agnes the herb woman is summoned from the village, but her remedies, willow bark tea and bleeding with rusted knives, will do more harm than good. Gerard the bailiff shows no sympathy. Work continues, he announces. Henrik's family will receive his portion of grain only if the rest of you meet the daily quota. It's not cruelty, it's medieval economics. Everyone works or everyone starves, and sentiment is a luxury that communities on the edge of survival can't afford. As you return to cutting barley, you realize the day is only half over. The sun continues to climb, the insects continue their assault, and your body continues to fail. Your vision blurs occasionally from dehydration, your hands shake from exhaustion, and your ankle screams with every step on the uneven ground. But you continue working, because stopping means your family goes hungry. You continue working because this is what your father did, and his father before him, and countless generations stretching back through time. You continue working because somewhere in the distance, Marie is preparing the midday meal with whatever scraps she can find, and Thomas is waiting for his father to come home. And this isn't rare, this is summer in medieval Europe. Across the countryside, in every village and every field, thousands of families are facing identical choices with identical courage. While you're dying of heat exhaustion in an English barley field, just 100 miles away in Canterbury, monks are retreating to cool stone chambers with thick walls and private wells. The heat affects everyone, but it doesn't affect everyone equally. Henrik finally stops breathing just as the sun begins its descent toward afternoon. His death isn't marked with ceremony or grief. There's no time for either. His body is wrapped in rough cloth and will be buried tonight quickly and without fanfare because summer heat makes corpses dangerous within hours. You've survived the morning, barely, but the afternoon sun in medieval England shows no mercy to the living, and the worst heat of the day is still coming. Your body is already pushed beyond its limits. Your family is depending on you to finish the day's work, and deep in your heart, you're beginning to understand what your ancestors knew. Survival isn't about being strong, it's about enduring when strength fails. The sickle grows heavier in your hands with each swing, the barley seems to multiply rather than diminish, and the heat shimmers off the ground like demons dancing just beyond vision. But you continue, because in medieval times there's no choice but to continue until you can't. The walk home from the fields feels like a death march through purgatory. Your legs shake with exhaustion, your vision blurs from dehydration, and every step on your twisted ankle sends lightning bolts of pain up your spine. The other workers stumble alongside you in silence. Speaking requires breath none of you can spare. Henrik's body bounces on the makeshift stretcher behind you, a grim reminder that making it through the workday doesn't guarantee making it through the night. The village you return to isn't the refuge you desperately need. The wooden huts radiate heat like ovens, their dark interiors offering no relief from the sun that spent the entire day baking them to furnace-like temperatures. Smoke rises from cooking fires that nobody wants to tend, but everyone needs to survive. The smell of burning wood mingles with human waste, spoiled food, and the sickly sweet stench of decay that hangs over medieval summer like a curse. Marie greets you at the door with worry etched deep in her face. Your appearance tells the story, clothes soaked with sweat and blood from insect bites, skin burned red despite your woolen covering, eyes glazed with the particular exhaustion that comes from pushing a human body beyond its limits. She doesn't ask how Henrik died. The stretcher being carried past your door tells that story clearly enough. "I saved water," she whispers, offering you a clay cup filled with the same questionable stream water you drank in the fields. But she's boiled it over the fire, using precious firewood in an attempt to make it safer. The gesture represents hours of her own suffering, tending a fire in the sweltering hut, breathing smoke, sweating through her pregnancy while you were dying in the fields. The evening meal waits on the wooden table. Yesterday's pottage, a thick gruel that's been simmering since morning. It smells wrong, fermented, with an undertone of decay that makes your empty stomach clench. But it's food, and food is life, even when it might be death in disguise. Medieval food preservation is less science than desperate prayer, and summer heat turns every meal into a gamble with death. The pottage has been sitting over the fire all day, new ingredients added to whatever remained from yesterday, and the day before. It's a continuous stew that never truly cools, never fully cleans, accumulating layers of bacteria and decay like geological strata of illness. You can see things floating in the thick mixture that weren't there this morning, small dark shapes that might be insects, or might be worse. The barley has fermented slightly in the heat, giving the entire pot a sour, alcoholic smell that makes your mouth water and your stomach recoil simultaneously. Marie has added the few vegetables she could find, turnips that are soft with rot, onions that have sprouted green shoots, herbs that might help the taste or might make you sicker. But here's what will surprise you. Despite the horror of the meal, Marie has carefully picked out the largest pieces of whatever meat she could find and placed them in your bowl. In a world where protein is precious beyond gold, where a chunk of gristle can mean the difference between strength and collapse, she gives you her portion without speaking. Love persists even when resources are poisonous. Thomas sits beside you, mechanically spooning the thick mixture into his mouth. At 3 years old, he's already learned not to complain about food, no matter how it smells or tastes. Children who are picky about meals don't survive medieval summers. His small face is flushed with heat rash, and you can see the beginnings of the same glassy-eyed exhaustion that preceded Henrik's collapse. The first spoonful hits your stomach like liquid fire. Your body, already pushed beyond its limits by heat and dehydration, rebels against the fermented mixture. But you force it down because calories are survival, and survival means seeing another dawn with your family intact. As you eat, you notice something disturbing. Through the gaps in your wooden walls, you can see Gerard the bailiff moving between houses with his wooden tablet, making marks beside certain names. The same houses where the sickest workers live, the same families who've been drinking from the contaminated stream longest. He's not offering help, he's taking inventory, calculating which workers might not be available tomorrow. By the time you finish eating, the fermented pottage has begun its assault on your digestive system. Stomach cramps grip you like iron bands, your head pounds with a rhythm that matches your pulse, and cold sweats break out across your fevered skin despite the oppressive heat. Medieval food poisoning isn't just uncomfortable, it's often fatal. and you have no way of knowing whether what you're feeling is temporary illness or the beginning of the same summer flux that's already claimed 3 families this week. Marie sends Thomas to fetch Agnes, the herb woman, the closest thing your village has to medical care. Agnes arrives carrying her leather satchel of remedies, her weathered face grim with the knowledge that she's already lost more patients than she's saved this summer. Her treatments are based on medieval understanding of the human body, which is to say, they're more likely to kill you than cure you. The humours are unbalanced, she announces, examining your flushed face and feeling your pulse. Too much blood, heated by the sun's influence. We must cool the body by releasing the excess. What she means is bloodletting, opening your veins with a rusted knife to drain away what medieval medicine believes is causing your illness. You face an impossible choice that countless medieval people faced every summer. You could submit to Agnes's treatment, which might weaken you further, but shows respect for the only medical authority available. You could refuse and offend the healer, potentially losing access to her help if your condition worsens. Or you could ask Marie to intervene, putting your pregnant wife in the impossible position of contradicting medical authority. Most people chose to continue with treatment, which is exactly why medieval medicine killed more patients than it cured. The logic seemed sound to medieval minds. If fever meant too much blood, then removing blood should reduce fever. The reality was blood loss weakening bodies that were already fighting for survival. Agnes produces her knife, a thin iron blade that's been used on dozens of patients without cleaning. There's no concept of sterilization, no understanding of infection, just the belief that the same tool that worked yesterday will work today. She makes small cuts on your forearm, collecting the blood in a wooden bowl that still holds stains from previous patients. The bloodletting does exactly what medieval people expected. It makes you feel cooler because you have less blood to carry heat through your body. What they don't understand is that it also makes you weaker, less able to fight off the food poisoning, more likely to collapse tomorrow in the fields. But weakness feels like improvement when your body is burning with fever. As Agnes works, she shares the village news. 2 more families have been sealed in their huts. The grain stores in the Lord's Manor have been damaged by fire, and there are whispers that bandits have been seen on the roads leading to market. Each piece of information adds weight to the growing sense that this summer is becoming a disaster that might not end with harvest. As darkness finally falls over the village, you expect the brutal heat to diminish, but medieval buildings are designed to hold warmth through cold winters, and that same thermal mass that keeps families alive in February becomes a torture chamber in July. Your wooden hut has absorbed heat all day like a massive oven, and now it radiates that stored energy back through the long, suffocating night. There's no relief in darkness, only different dangers. The mosquitoes that swarmed you in the fields follow you indoors, their high-pitched whining filling the air as they feast on your family's blood. The fleas and lice that live in your bedding become more active in the heat, turning sleep into a futile battle against parasites that see your exhausted body as an all-night buffet. Marie lies beside you, her pregnancy making the heat even more unbearable. She's stopped sweating, a dangerous sign that medieval people recognize but can't treat. Her breathing is shallow and rapid, and occasionally she makes small sounds of distress that tell you the baby is suffering too. Pregnancy in medieval summer is often a death sentence for both mother and child, but there's nothing you can do except watch and pray. Thomas has developed a fever that makes his small body burn like a coal. He tosses restlessly on his straw mattress, occasionally crying out in delirium. Child mortality rates soar during medieval summers, and you've seen too many families bury their little ones to feel anything but dread as you watch your son struggle against the combined assault of heat, insects, and illness. Outside, you can hear the sounds of the village slowly dying, coughing echoes from the sealed huts where families are losing their battle against disease. Dogs whine in the heat, their panting growing weaker as the night progresses. Somewhere in the distance, you can hear the sound of digging. grave holes being prepared for tomorrow's inevitable casualties. But here's what will surprise you. Despite the hellish conditions, Agnes the herb woman appears at your door near midnight with cool cloths she's managed to wet from the Lord's well. She doesn't ask for payment or thanks. She simply nods toward Thomas and begins applying the damp fabric to his burning forehead. Even in medieval hell, healers continue healing when they can. As you lie in the darkness, your body racked with pain from food poisoning, bloodletting, and exhaustion, you begin to understand something about your ancestors. They weren't stronger than modern people. They were just forced to endure suffering that would break contemporary humans within hours. Every comfort you take for granted, clean water, safe food, medical care, cool shelter, exists because people like you chose to survive one more night, one more day, one more summer of impossible hardship. Through the long, airless hours before dawn, as your family suffers around you and the village slowly burns with fever and despair, you face the hardest choice of all. Whether to give up or find the strength to see another sunrise. Tomorrow, the fields will be waiting, Gerard will be taking his inventory of the living and the dead, and the sun will rise on another day of medieval summer hell. But you close your eyes and choose survival, because that's what love demands, because Marie needs you, because Thomas needs you, because somewhere in the future, generations who will never know your name are depending on the choice you make tonight. The hours between midnight and dawn stretch like an eternity of suffering. You drift in and out of fevered consciousness, your body racked with chills despite the oppressive heat that continues to radiate from the wooden walls. The bloodletting has left you weak and dizzy, while the food poisoning wages war in your stomach with cramps that double you over in silent agony. Speaking would wake Thomas, whose fever has worsened to the point where his small body shakes uncontrollably. Marie hasn't slept at all. You can hear her shallow breathing, punctuated by soft gasps when the baby kicks against her swollen belly. Pregnancy in this heat is like carrying fire inside fire, and you watch helplessly as she grows weaker with each passing hour. Her face, illuminated by the faint moonlight filtering through the gaps in your walls, has taken on the waxy pallor that medieval people recognize as the approach of death. But the heat isn't the only enemy stalking your village tonight. Through your fevered haze, you hear sounds that make your blood run cold despite your fever. The soft scraping of footsteps moving between houses, the creak of wooden doors opening where they should remain closed, and the unmistakable smell of smoke where no cooking fires should be burning. Someone is moving through the village in the darkness, and their intentions aren't merciful. Medieval summer nights bring out dangers that daylight keeps hidden. With families weakened by heat, disease, and exhaustion, the village becomes vulnerable to predators both human and animal. You hear the nervous whinnying of horses outside, riders who don't belong here, moving with the careful stealth of men who don't want to be seen. Bandits know that summer is harvest season, when grain stores are full but defenses are weak. They know that sick villagers can't fight back, that weakened men can't protect their families, that desperation makes people willing to surrender everything just to live another day. The riders circling your village aren't here to trade or seek shelter. They're here to take what little your community has managed to survive on. Through the walls, you hear the sound of wooden doors being forced open, followed by muffled voices and the scrape of heavy objects being dragged across floors. The bandits are systematically looting the grain stores, taking the seed corn that means survival through winter, stealing the barley that represents months of backbreaking labor under the killing sun. But there's something else happening in the darkness, something that makes your fevered mind struggle to focus. The smoke you smell isn't coming from cooking fires or torches. It's the acrid smell of burning grain, of deliberate destruction rather than accidental fire. Someone isn't just stealing food, they're destroying it entirely. As you strain to listen through your delirium, you begin to piece together a pattern that's been building all week. The sealed huts near the cesspit. Gerard's careful inventory of the weakest workers, the mysterious fires at the Lord's grain stores, and now bandits arriving precisely when the village is least able to defend itself. This isn't random violence, it's coordinated destruction, and someone in your own community is helping it happen. A shadow passes your window, moving with the familiar gait of someone you recognize. Even through your fever, you know that walk, the slight limp from an old injury, the careful way of placing feet that comes from years of supervising field work. Gerard the bailiff is outside your hut, and he's not alone. You force yourself to crawl toward the gap in your wall, pressing your ear against the opening despite the waves of nausea that threaten to overwhelm you. What you hear makes your blood run colder than any fever could manage. "The sick ones first," Gerard's voice carries clearly in the still air. "Fire spreads faster when there's no one left to fight it. By morning, half the village will be ash, and the other half will be too weak to ask questions." Another voice responds, rough, unfamiliar, speaking with the accent of men who live by violence rather than labor. "What about the Lord's men? Won't they investigate?" Gerard's laugh is bitter as wormwood. "The Lord's men are 3 days' ride away, dealing with uprisings in the northern villages. By the time they return, this will look like another tragic summer fire. Grain stores destroyed, families dead from disease and heat. No one will question why grain prices double by harvest time." The pieces fall into place with horrifying clarity. Gerard isn't just supervising the harvest, he's orchestrating its destruction. By burning the stored grain and allowing disease to devastate the workforce, he's creating artificial scarcity that will make the remaining supplies worth a fortune. The bandits aren't random raiders, they're his partners, here to complete the final phase of a plan that turns human suffering into profit. You face an impossible choice that will define not just your fate, but the fate of every surviving family in your village. You could try to warn the others, but that means leaving your dying family and confronting armed men while weakened by fever and blood loss. You could stay silent and protect your own, but that means watching your neighbors burn while you do nothing. Or you could try to create a distraction that might save some lives while likely costing your own. Most people in your situation would choose silence, because protecting your own family is the most basic human instinct. But as you look at Thomas burning with fever and Marie struggling to breathe, you realize that your family's survival depends on the community's survival. In medieval villages, when the community dies, families die too. Your body screams in protest as you force yourself to stand, every muscle cramping from dehydration and blood loss. Marie's eyes flutter open as she feels you moving, and in them you see the terrible understanding that comes to women who've watched too many men make heroic choices that leave widows and orphans behind. "Don't," she whispers, her voice barely audible. "Thomas needs his father. I need my husband. Let someone else be the hero." But you know what she doesn't yet understand? There is no one else. Henrik is dead. The other men are either too sick to move or already fled with their families. If Gerard's plan succeeds, by dawn your village will be ash and memory, and your family will die anyway when winter comes to a community with no food stores. You kiss Marie's fevered forehead, tasting the salt of her sweat, and whisper the only words that matter. "I love you. Keep Thomas alive." The night air hits your fever-weakened body like a physical blow, but you force yourself to move toward the center of the village where Gerard and his men are methodically setting fires. Your plan is simple and desperate. If you can reach the church bell and ring it loudly enough, you might wake the surviving villagers before the fires spread too far. Each step is agony. Your twisted ankle collapses twice, sending you sprawling in the dirt. Your vision blurs from the fever, making shadows dance like demons at the edge of sight. But you crawl when you can't walk, because somewhere behind you, Thomas is fighting for his life, and somewhere ahead, an entire community's future hangs in the balance. The church bell tower looms above you like a mountain of stone and impossible hope. The rope hangs just 20 feet away, but it might as well be 20 miles for a man whose body is shutting down from heat exhaustion, blood loss, and food poisoning. But here's what will surprise you. As you reach for the rope with hands that shake like autumn leaves, Agnes the herb woman appears beside you in the darkness. She doesn't speak. Words would alert the arsonists, but she simply nods and helps you grasp the rope with what little strength you both have left. Together you pull with everything remaining in your breaking bodies. The bell's bronze voice rings out across the night, shattering the silence with a sound like Judgment Day itself. Once, twice, 3 times, the ancient warning that has called villagers to arms for generations beyond memory. The bell's call awakens the village like a resurrection. Doors bang open as families stumble into the night, some carrying children, others clutching whatever possessions they can grab. The sight that greets them would break stronger hearts than theirs, half the grain stores already burning, armed strangers moving through their homes, and their own bailiff directing the destruction with the cold efficiency of a man who's planned this for months. Gerard's face when he sees you by the bell tower is a mask of rage and calculation. He shouts orders to his men, but the damage is done, the community is awake, and even weakened people fighting for their children's lives can be dangerous opponents. What follows isn't a battle in any heroic sense. It's a desperate struggle between dying people and armed criminals, fought with farming tools against professional weapons, by firelight that turns everything into dancing shadows and unclear shapes. You collapse beside the bell tower, your strength finally exhausted, but you watch as your neighbors, people you've worked beside, shared meals with, argued with over boundary stones, choose to fight rather than surrender. Thomas the carpenter, despite his age and weakness, swings his hammer with the same precision he uses to build homes. Young Peter, the baker's son, barely 16, stands guard over the families with children. Even Father Benedict emerges from the stone church, wielding a staff like the righteous anger of God himself. Gerard and his men, faced with unexpected resistance from people who should have been easy victims, begin to retreat toward their horses. But not before Gerard looks directly at you, lying broken beside the bell tower, and speaks words that will echo in your memory. You've killed them all, Willem. Without the grain stores, they'll starve by Christmas. Your heroism just bought them a slower death. As the bandits disappear into the night, leaving behind burning buildings and scattered families, you realize that Gerard might be right. You've prevented tonight's massacre, but you haven't solved the underlying crisis. The grain is still mostly destroyed, the community is still sick and weakened, and winter is still coming with its own demands for survival. But as Agnes helps you back toward your hut, as neighbors emerge to fight the fires together, as Marie's voice calls your name through the darkness with relief and love, you understand something that Gerard never could. Sometimes survival isn't about having enough resources, it's about having enough hope to keep trying when resources fail. You've survived one day of medieval summer, but just barely. Your body is broken, your family is sick, and your community faces starvation. Yet somehow, in choosing to ring that bell, in refusing to let evil triumph through your silence, you've done something that transcends mere survival. You've reminded everyone, including yourself, that being human means more than just drawing breath. It means choosing to protect what matters, even when the cost seems unbearable. As dawn approaches and the immediate crisis passes, you face the hardest truth of all. Tomorrow will bring another day of medieval summer hell, and you'll have to find the strength to face it all over again. As the first pale light of dawn creeps across the devastated village, you lie beside your hut's wall, your body broken, but your spirit somehow intact. The night that nearly destroyed everything has passed, leaving behind a community that looks like a battlefield. Half the grain stores are smoking ruins, families huddle around their few remaining possessions, and the air still carries the acrid smell of destruction mixed with the sweet stench of death. But here's what Gerard couldn't understand, what no amount of calculation could predict. People who have nothing left to lose become capable of extraordinary things. As the sun rises on what should have been the end of your village, neighbors emerge from their homes not to mourn, but to rebuild. Thomas the carpenter examines the damaged grain stores with an eye toward salvage. Agnes moves between families, treating burns and smoke inhalation with the same determination she's shown all summer. Even Father Benedict organizes work parties to clear debris and assess what can be saved. Marie appears beside you, carrying Thomas in her arms. Your son's fever has broken during the night's chaos, and though he's weak, his eyes are clear for the first time in days. The crisis that nearly killed your family has somehow passed its peak, leaving behind the slow work of recovery. Marie doesn't speak about your choice to leave them. She simply sits beside you, sharing her water and her warmth, understanding that love sometimes requires impossible decisions. You survived one day of medieval summer, but the word survived carries weight that modern people can barely comprehend. You didn't just endure heat and hardship, you faced choices that would break contemporary humans within hours, and somehow found the strength to choose hope over despair, community over self-preservation, love over fear. As you watch your village begin the long process of healing, one truth becomes undeniably clear. Medieval people weren't superhuman. They weren't tougher, stronger, or more resilient than modern humans. They were simply forced to endure suffering that would overwhelm anyone, and they did it because the alternative was watching everyone they loved die. Think about what you've experienced in just one summer day. You woke up covered in parasites, ate contaminated food, worked 12 hours in killing heat with primitive tools, drank water that could poison you, received medical treatment that made you sicker, and then chose to risk your life to save neighbors who might not have done the same for you. Every decision was impossible, every choice carried the weight of life and death, and every moment tested the very limits of human endurance. Modern people like to imagine they're soft, that comfort has made them weak, that they couldn't survive what their ancestors endured. But that's not true. The difference isn't strength, it's options. When you have air conditioning, you don't need to develop tolerance for killing heat. When you have clean water, you don't need to risk dysentery with every drink. When you have modern medicine, you don't need to choose between bloodletting and death. Your ancestors survived not because they were superior, but because they had no choice. Every comfort you take for granted, every cool room, every clean glass of water, every safe meal exists because people like Willem chose to endure one more day, one more summer, one more generation of impossible hardship. They didn't survive because it was easy. They survived because love demanded it. Right now, as you read this, you're experiencing luxuries that medieval royalty couldn't imagine. The room you're in is probably climate-controlled, keeping you comfortable regardless of the weather outside. The water you can access with a simple turn of a handle is cleaner than anything a medieval lord could obtain. The food in your kitchen has been inspected, regulated, and preserved using methods that would seem like magic to people who lived on fermented grain and weevil-infested bread. But more than that, you have something Willem could never dream of: choice. You can choose what to eat, where to work, how to spend your time. You can seek medical care that actually heals instead of harms. You can travel beyond the 10-mile radius where most medieval people spent their entire lives. You can learn to read, express opinions, pursue dreams that extend beyond simple survival. When your air conditioning hums quietly on a summer day, remember Willem collapsing from heat stroke in a barley field. When you turn a tap for clean, cold water, remember Marie, boiling stream water over a fire in a sweltering hut, using precious fuel to make poisons slightly less deadly. When you take medicine that actually works, remember Agnes, the herb woman, doing her best with remedies that killed more often than they cured. This isn't about guilt, it's about perspective. Your comfortable life isn't something to apologize for, It's something to recognize and protect. The systems that provide clean water, safe food, effective medicine, and climate control didn't appear by accident. They were built by generations of people who understood suffering intimately and chose to create something better for their children. Willem's story didn't end with that summer dawn. He survived, but barely. The injuries from his twisted ankle never properly healed, leaving him partially lame for the rest of his shortened life. The bloodletting weakened him permanently, making him susceptible to every illness that swept through the village. He died 3 winters later, at the age of 27, from what we would now recognize as pneumonia, treatable with modern antibiotics, but a death sentence in medieval England. But here's what matters. Marie survived. Thomas survived. The village, despite Gerard's sabotage and the destruction of that terrible night, found ways to endure. They shared resources, rebuilt what they could, and made it through the winter by cooperation and collective determination. Thomas grew up to become a craftsman, married a girl from the next village, and had children of his own who never knew the kind of summer hell their grandfather endured. And this pattern repeated across thousands of villages, through hundreds of summers, across centuries of human endurance. People like Willem, ordinary, flawed, struggling people, chose to keep going when every rational calculation said they should give up. They chose love over despair, hope over surrender, community over individual survival. That chain of choices made by people whose names history forgot led directly to you. Every breath you draw, every comfortable moment you experience, every opportunity you have to pursue happiness instead of mere survival, all of it exists because people like Willem and Marie refused to let evil triumph, refused to let suffering have the final word. The next time you feel overwhelmed by modern problems, traffic jams, work stress, political frustrations, social media drama, remember that these are the struggles of people who have solved the fundamental challenges that consumed your ancestors. You don't worry about drinking contaminated water, eating spoiled food, or dying from preventable diseases. Your problems, real as they feel, are the luxury problems of people who've inherited solutions to humanity's greatest challenges. That doesn't mean your struggles don't matter. It means you have the gift of struggling with higher-order problems because people like Willem solved the lower-order ones. You get to worry about fulfillment, purpose, and happiness because they worried about heat, hunger, and survival. But with that inheritance comes responsibility. The systems that protect you, clean water, safe food, effective medicine, stable government, require constant maintenance and vigilance. They can be lost as easily as they were gained, and history is full of civilizations that forgot how fragile comfort really is. When you vote, remember that good governance means the difference between communities that protect their weakest members and communities that exploit them. When you support medical research, remember that the distance between medieval bloodletting and modern surgery was built by people who refused to accept that suffering was inevitable. When you advocate for clean water and environmental protection, remember that the alternative isn't inconvenience. It's returning to the conditions that made a single summer day potentially fatal. Perhaps the most profound lesson from Willem's story isn't about the past, it's about the present. Every ordinary day you live contains miracles that medieval people couldn't imagine. The fact that you woke up this morning in a clean bed, that you had safe food for breakfast, that you can move through your day without fear of death from heat exhaustion or contaminated water, these aren't small things. They're the accumulated victories of human civilization over the chaos and suffering that once defined daily existence. The medieval world wasn't distant history, it was the default state of human existence for most of our species' time on Earth. The comfort and safety you experience today is the exception, not the rule. It exists because countless people like Willem chose to endure impossible hardship and then work to ensure their children wouldn't have to do the same. So when you flip a switch and lights illuminate your room, when you adjust a thermostat and your environment becomes comfortable, when you reach for medicine that actually heals, pause for a moment. Not to feel guilty, but to feel grateful. not to diminish your own struggles, but to recognize how far humanity has traveled from the brutal simplicity of survival. Your ancestors didn't endure medieval summers so you could feel bad about air conditioning. They endured them so you could have air conditioning and then use the energy and creativity that air conditioning provides to solve even greater challenges, to push human possibility even further, to ensure that their great-great-grandchildren inherit an even better world than the one you received. Willem died young, in pain, having seen too much suffering for any human to bear. But he lived long enough to ring that bell, long enough to choose love over fear, long enough to pass something precious to the next generation. His story lives on, not in monuments or history books, but in the simple fact that you exist, comfortable and safe, with the luxury of reading about struggles you'll never have to face. That's not just history, that's victory. That's the gift of human endurance, passed down through generations of people who refused to let suffering have the final word. Honor that gift, protect it, and when your time comes, pass it forward to people who will inherit challenges you can't imagine, carrying forward the unbroken chain of hope that stretches from Willem's medieval summer to your air-conditioned present and beyond, into futures bright with possibility.